They say you can smell a storm before it hits. I smelled this one the second I saw the new unit newsletter sitting on my desk. Fresh logo, sleek lines, a tagline that read, "Forging tomorrow's readiness through synergistic innovation." Synergistic. That's not a word you hear much on a military base. We deal in grit, timing, and chain of command. Not synergy. Not innovation, unless duct taping a busted generator counts. I'm Lieutenant Marcus Hale, 41 years old, third-generation Army. I've served this base longer than half the junior officers have been out of ROTC. You don't last this long unless you learn how to read the room, or in this case, the memo. And this memo reeked of something not incompetence, not even ambition. It smelled like politics, like someone trying too hard to look like they belonged. I flipped through the pages while nursing a burnt cup of coffee. New section headers in bold blue, leadership spotlight interviews, a monthly morale dashboard. Our base had never once needed a dashboard to know morale was low. You could see it in the tired eyes, the boots dragging across gravel, the silence in the mess hall. Nobody needed a metric to confirm what was already written on our faces. But this newsletter wasn't trying to inform. It was trying to impress. And when someone starts caring more about appearances than systems, it means they're either selling something or covering something up. I've been around long enough to know the difference. And this felt like both. The base hadn't changed on the surface. Still the same cracked pavement near the barracks. Same rusted fencing by the back lot. But the air was different. The way people spoke in meetings. The sudden arrival of those civilian liaisons with glossy pamphlets and no rank on their collars. One even asked if our armory had a mission statement. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. That was when my stomach turned slow but sure, like the way a machine sounds right before it breaks. I'd spent 2 decades making things work around here, tracking supply chains, managing maintenance, filling in for broken leadership when it mattered. I wasn't flashy. Never asked for medals or speeches. I made sure the gears turned. Now someone was polishing the gears without knowing how they worked. You don't fix what's not broken by redesigning its logo. You fix it by knowing what each piece does and why it's there in the first place. But that knowledge only comes from being in the trenches, from watching what fails and what holds. And the people showing up now, they hadn't watched anything. They were tourists in a machine built on sacrifice. So I kept the newsletter, tucked it in my drawer under a stack of requisition forms and damage reports. Not because I cared about it, because I knew one day I'd need a reminder of the exact moment when everything started to go wrong. And it started with that smell, not of paper or ink, but of someone trying to reinvent something they didn't even understand. Captain Owen Cross showed up on a Tuesday morning, just after chow, like a character someone forgot to cast properly. No salute, no intro, just strolled into the logistics office wearing a brand new CU and spotless boots like he'd walked straight out of a recruitment ad. Someone whispered he was the general's nephew. Of course he was. He called himself a strategic advisor, which, near as I could tell, meant he had no real job, no assigned duties, and no idea how anything actually worked. First thing out of his mouth was about aligning unit culture with emergent command synergies. I looked around to see if anyone else caught how ridiculous that sounded. No one said a word. Cross didn't carry a sidearm. His belt didn't have a single scuff on it. The only thing he brought to the table was a tablet filled with slides. Colorful arrows, mission value diagrams, buzzwords stacked like sandbags. He dropped phrases like vertical integration and morale uplift like he'd earned them on the battlefield. I'd seen privates with 1 week in the theater carry themselves with more weight. It took him less than a week to start showing up in briefings he wasn't invited to. He'd nod through supply updates, throw out terms like bandwidth realignment, then derail the meeting asking why our motor pool didn't have a lounge space for wellness resets. Meanwhile, The mechanics were patching up Humvees with borrowed parts and prayers. He smiled too much. The kind of smile that doesn't come from confidence, but from knowing someone powerful has your back. He'd clap people on the shoulder, call them champ or pole, then rewrite their reports with corporate fluff and pass them off as strategy. The younger officers didn't push back. They laughed at his jokes, nodded during his presentations, and played along. Merit didn't seem to matter anymore. Cross had lunch with the general twice that first week. I saw it with my own eyes. Corner booth in the officers' mess, talking like equals, while the rest of us waited in line. A day later, 2 of his efficiency recommendations became standing orders. Just like that. No vetting. No field test. He started renaming things. The armory became the Readiness Integration Hub. The rec hall turned into the Resilience Center. Even the chow hall got rebranded as the Nutritional Readiness Zone. Like slapping new words on old structures made them modern. No one felt more ready. We just got more confused. Morale didn't go up, but complaints started getting flagged as resistance to innovation. One corporal got transferred after questioning the new inventory system. Cross pushed through a system that mislabeled half our spare parts and nearly derailed a shipment. When I raised concerns in my report, I got a thank you email signed by Cross and a memo asking if I was open to upskilling. He never stayed long in one place. Cross would pop into a department, smile, drop a few sentences of pure nonsense, then leave like he'd just performed a miracle. No follow-through. No accountability. But the higher-ups acted like he was some kind of genius. Fresh perspective. Next, gene leadership. All I saw was a man using connections as a shield and jargon as camouflage. It wasn't just annoying. It was dangerous. Systems that worked were being dismantled by someone who didn't understand why they worked in the first place. Veterans who'd kept this place running through storms, shortages, and shutdowns were getting sidelined for someone who hadn't earned a single scar. I kept my distance for the most part. Watched. Listened. Filed everything in the back of my head. I'd seen bad officers before, but this was different. This wasn't incompetence. It was a theater. A performance was played for the brass, while the rest of us picked up the slack. Cross didn't know it yet, but every move he made left a trail. And I knew how to follow trails. I'd done it in the field. I could do it in a conference room. And something about the way he smiled, the way he floated above the rules, it told me I'd need to. It started with a memo. No discussion, no heads up, just an email from Cross's new alignment liaison stating that the old command flow was being decentralized for increased agility. Whatever that meant. 1 week later, Captain Morris was gone. 30 years in the field, gone without ceremony. His replacement, a civilian consultant named Bree, who introduced herself by asking if our unit tracked emotional output metrics. They came in waves. One by one, officers with field-earned instincts were pushed aside for people who'd never worn a uniform. People who held meetings about meetings. One guy had a man bun and wore sneakers with his ID badge clipped to a Supreme hoodie. He asked if we could shift to asynchronous conflict de-escalation models. I asked if he knew how to clear a malfunction on M4. He laughed like I was joking. With every change, more gears jammed. Orders arrived late. Supply runs missed key components. The comms team got reassigned to a narrative reinforcement pod, whatever the hell that was. My guys stopped asking questions. They just did what they could to keep the walls from crumbling. We were held together by duct tape, grit, and habit. And every day, Cross strutted through like a man who thought chaos meant progress. Morale sank faster than anyone dared to admit. Staff sergeants whispered in corners. Platoon leads second-guessed their reports. Nobody trusted the new flowcharts taped to the walls. We used to have protocols. Now we had color-coded arrows that led nowhere. And if you questioned them, you got flagged for legacy mindset. I stopped speaking up. Not because I agreed, because it didn't matter. They weren't listening. Cross wasn't looking for input. He was looking for obedience, and I wasn't going to hand him that. But I wasn't going to shout into a void either. So I nodded, took notes, pretended to adapt. Behind closed doors, I fixed what I could, rerouted requests, covered for mistakes that weren't ours. And every night, I stared at my board and watched it fall apart. Not from outside fire, from inside rot. I'd seen a lot in my years, but this was new. This was watching the soul of a unit drain out while the lights still flickered on. The first sign that morale had flatlined came disguised as a notification. Every soldier on base got an alert at 600. Your performance is outstanding. You are a beacon of excellence. It was signed by something called the Optimizer AI. Most of us thought it was spam. It wasn't. Cross called it digital affirmation, said it created psychological momentum. What it really created was confusion. One of my guys had just been chewed out for a missing gear log when the app told him he was an operational hero. He laughed so hard he almost got written up again. Then came the resilience pods, converted shipping containers with beanbags and lavender diffusers. They were supposed to be quiet zones for an emotional reset. Nobody used them except the night shift smokers and one supply clerk who took naps in the corner. But Cross kept citing them as proof that morale was rising. We got weekly check-ins now, not with ANCAUs, but with wellness coordinators who used phrases like vibe, conflict, and gratitude traction. One even asked if my leadership style was overly goal-centric. I told her my goal was not to bury any more of my soldiers. She smiled and handed me a mindfulness workbook. There was a karaoke night, a themed potluck, a vision board session where a civilian in designer boots asked us to draw our future purpose with crayons. A lance corporal left halfway through and never came back. Nobody blamed him. The younger troops looked lost. They came in thinking they'd serve something bigger than themselves. Instead, they were told to track morale metrics on an app that couldn't spell their names right. One private got told he was crushing it the same day his housing stipend got cut. I found him in the motor pool, staring at nothing hands black with grease. Respect is a fragile thing. You can't fake it with slogans or scented rooms. You earn it through sweat consistency and showing up when it matters. Cross didn't get that. He thought leadership was branding. The rest of us just kept moving slower now, like people waiting for orders that would never come. And maybe that was the point. Keep us distracted. Keep us quiet. As long as the graph said morale was up, no one would ask why the soul of the place was gone. I didn't plan it at first. It started with a single forwarded email flagged for the vague phrasing and oddly timed approval. Just didn't sit right. Then another. A contract renewal, stamped and processed before the usual reviews. The signature looked copied. Not forged, just careless. By the end of that week, I had a folder. Nothing fancy. Labeled Ops Review Q4 in case anyone stumbled across it. Inside were copies of purchase orders, revised duty logs, and a screenshot of Cross's calendar where one call was marked with just the word alignment. No location. No context. I backed up my inbox every night. Set a private cloud server. Encrypted. Tucked a second copy on a thumb drive behind a false panel in my desk. Not because I thought they'd come looking, because I knew someday someone would. The invoices came next. Half of them didn't match previous vendor rates. One line item billed us for emergent morale traction support. 20 grand. Another listed payment to an outfit called Echo Bridge Group. No listed service. Just a Gmail contact. I looked it up. No website. But the name appeared on Cross's LinkedIn endorsements. The deeper I dug, the more patterns I found. Vendors with shared addresses. Shell companies were formed within days of each other. Billing cycles that hit during national holidays when oversight would be lax. I didn't accuse. I just logged. Cross moved like a man who thought the rules didn't apply, who knew his name opened doors no one else could touch. He floated through meetings, kissed babies, and shook hands with visiting brass. But behind that smile, deals were moving. Quiet ones, dirty ones, the kind that don't show up on dashboards. I watched him closely. Not what he said, where he stood. Who followed him out of meetings the way certain files got moved from shared drives to personal ones. I started keeping screenshots, timestamps, audit trails. Not because I wanted a fight, because I wanted proof. My father used to say that rot doesn't start with a roof. It starts in the beams hidden under paint and polish. Cross wasn't the storm. He was the termites. And I was going to follow every single tunnel until I found the nest. Not out loud. Not yet. Just a quiet war, one folder at a time. Her name was Tessa Monroe. We served together in Kuwait years ago when she was JAG. She had the sharpest mind I'd ever seen in uniform and a way of reading regulations like they were puzzles built to be cracked. I hadn't talked to her in over a year, but when I texted, she called back in 5 minutes. I didn't give her the whole story, just said I needed a second opinion on an assignment chain. She asked for the designation letter. I sent what I had. A PDF Cross had been forwarded weeks ago, with no signature, no routing code, just a header and a job title. She went quiet. Then she asked for the command authorization form. I didn't have one. That's when she said it. There's your problem. Clause 27C. Every temporary assignment of executive authority has to be documented and ratified by the chain of command. Base operations strategic oversight personnel movement. All of it. No ratification, no position. She sent me the code. I read it twice. It was clear as day. Cross was never assigned legally. He was installed, verbally and formally, and without the backing of any official process. Someone slid him into power through handshakes and favors, not paperwork, which meant every order he'd given, every firing, every contract was floating on thin air. I sat in my truck outside the admin building, holding the phone like it weighed 100 pounds. All that noise, all that disruption, and none of it was real. It wasn't just corruption now. It was a breach. A structural one. And I had it in writing. Tessa warned me. Said something like this could get ugly. Power like that doesn't go quietly. I told her I wasn't looking for quiet. I was looking for clean. She sent over a formal analysis memo. No names, just a procedural review. I printed it, folded it, and slid it into the back of my notebook. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee going cold, legal text highlighted in front of me. Clause 27C. Ratification required. No exceptions. Cross didn't have a command. He had a costume. And now I had the seam, the place to pull. Not yet, but soon. And when it ripped, it was going to take his whole empire down with it. The room was already half full when I walked in. Conference table polished to a shine, bottled water lined up like parade gear. Cross stood at the TED clicker in hand, grinning like he was about to sell a miracle. I took a seat by the window. Didn't speak. Didn't even take out my notes. Just watched. He kicked off with a slideshow. Bright colors, circular flowcharts, phrases like adaptive mission calibration and tactical momentum. No substance, just gloss. He pointed at graphs no one understood and paused for fake laughter that never came. The brass around the table shifted in their seats, nodding like they had somewhere better to be. I waited. Halfway through a slide on resource realignment, Cross dropped the big one. Said the old model was done. That my team's structure was bloated. Going forward, strategic leadership would move to a more agile framework directed from his new advisory suite. That's when I moved. I didn't stand fast. Just placed a folder on the table right next to the nearest kernel. Said it softly. Clause 27C. The room went quiet. I opened the folder and slid a single sheet toward the center. Tessa's memo, stamped and dated, outlined the missing ratification. No command appointment. No legal authority. Cross laughed. Nervous, tight. Tried to wave it off as old paperwork. Said things had changed. Said the general approved it off book. But the colonel beside me had already picked up the sheet. His eyes narrowed. He turned a page. Then another. I spoke clearly. Every decision Cross made from day one violated the chain of command. Every contract, every reassignment, every dollar spent. All of it. Unauthorized. Cross stammered. Said this was a misunderstanding. His voice cracked on the word misunderstanding. That's when Major Rivas, quiet all morning, leaned in. Said he'd checked the board log last night. No appointment on record. No signature. No formal directive. He turned to Cross and asked one question. Who exactly told you that you had this authority? Cross blinked. Mouth half open. Silence. I didn't smile. Didn't raise my voice. Just stood and pushed the rest of the folder forward. Vendor maps, invoice gaps, shell company ties. One by one. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The room didn't explode. It deflated, like someone let the air out of a tent. Cross dropped the clicker, reached for a water bottle he didn't drink. The colonel closed the folder and looked toward the door. We all knew what came next. Investigation. Suspension. Quiet removal under administrative language. But the moment was mine, not for revenge. For clarity. I turned to leave. No applause. No speech. Just steps echoing down the hallway. The click of my boots on the tile. Behind me, Cross was still sitting. Still trying to figure out how the ground had vanished under his feet. And me, I walked out clean. Still in uniform. Still standing. Still in command. The next morning I came in at 600 like I always did. Same uniform, same coffee, in the thermos, same badge swipe at the side entrance. No parade, no new nameplate on the door. Just me, a desk full of unfinished reports, and a base that finally felt steady again. They offered me the promotion. Briefly, politely. Said it was the least they could do. I thanked them and turned it down. My fight wasn't for rank. It was for structure, for truth, for the 100 little routines that kept the wheels from grinding. I spent the next few weeks clearing out the junk, terminated the nonsense contracts, reinstated solid officers, filed reports, signed off on repairs, sat through the boring meetings and actually listened this time. No fireworks. Just follow through. The mood across the unit shifted slowly. Not dramatic, but real. You could hear it in the cadence drills, in the way people nodded when I passed instead of looking over their shoulders. We had weathered a storm. Not perfectly, but enough. I didn't talk about what happened. Not much. Let the paperwork do the talking. Let the silence speak for itself. Sometimes that's stronger than a victory speech. One afternoon I walked past the field. The sun is shining overhead. Dry wind is pushing dust along the sideline. A squad of recruits ran formation drills. Voices, steady steps aligned. Not perfect, but crisp. Disciplined. Focused. I stopped for a second and watched. No one noticed me. They weren't supposed to. That's how it should be. The system is working again. Quietly. Efficiently. Like always. Then I turned, headed back to the ops room, and closed the door behind me. No crisis today. No cleanup. Just a man doing his job. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough.